All right, we're here with Seth Shapiro from New Amsterdam Media. Just finished up the panel called Hulu and Hollywood is Love on the Rocks. Talking a little bit about Hulu, where do you think all this is headed? Viacom just pulled all the Comedy Central shows. What do you think is next for Hulu?
Well, one of the things that we talked about is the fact that, Hulu is owned by three companies, three different networks, ABC, NBC, and Fox. Viacom doesn't own a network, so there's no sort of indirect ownership in building the brand equity of Hulu, but there is a revenue split. So if you have a big enough brand, which The Daily Show certainly is, it's the #3 most watched show on Hulu and a huge show with this demographic. The thinking on the Viacom side would be, why don't we just keep all of the ad revenue and build our own presence and form our own direct relationship with the customer? So that's sort of the essence, I think, of the thinking there.
Which is strange because when you watch The Daily Show on thedailyshow.com, all the ads are just internal promos, so they're not even taking advantage of pulling the shows.
Yeah, that's sort of the embedded thing in this, is like when you actually look at the ad inventory against some of these shows, there are a lot of PSAs, there's a lot of stuff that's not directly, leading brands. So the question would be, how do you, does Comedy Central have the ability to monetize it more effectively directly?
And we talked a little bit about targeted ads on Hulu. One person in the panel said that he gets a lot of women's creams ad. I know I've had that experience also. What do you think Hulu needs to do? Are they looking into possibly having targeted ads?
Well, they're really smart guys, and they're actually, sort of doing God's work in the sense that, they are trying to create a completely new premium experience that is based in ownership by the networks themselves. So that's, those are a lot of principalities to keep, especially when there are three networks. And I'm sure that they're doing everything they can to make the ad targeting more effective and to increase the sales. They probably have to do things that are almost harder, because they've got to coordinate with the ad sales guys for each of the networks. They've got to figure out, do they do are these blended ads purchases where a 30 Rock sponsor who advertises on TV also gets ads online, and if so, what's that worth relative to? So there's a lot of mouths to feed. In terms of actually targeting it, I don't know how granular their data is, but certainly Facebook is an example of ads that sort of get, and obviously Google get sort of eerily specific, and that's sort of what sponsors like.
You talked a bit about building a community within a network show like Lost. I worked at an NBC station for 10 years, so I witnessed something at the pinnacle and then absolutely hit rock bottom. What do networks need to do to build on their business model, so to say?
Well, you sort of hit on one thing. If you can develop a direct relationship with the consumer, that's obviously always best. The sort of concept that was really interesting for a few years and still is this notion of disintermediation. If you can take if you produce a show and you can go direct to consumers, and not have a cable network or distributor in between, that's obviously a much bigger piece of the pie, but you've got to be able to directly reach those customers. So right now you've got a producer of a show, production company that does a show, then that show goes to a network, and then the network does a deal with a distributor like a Comcast or a DirecTV. There is this sort of musical chair situation where potentially, if you can aggregate a big enough audience, one of those two terms can come out, or both. So networks are definitely in the business of trying to increase, their brand equity to consumers and figure out ways to keep their brands alive.
One of the interesting things you touched on was that you believe technology like DVR and Tivo has enabled shows like 24 and Lost to be on the air. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and why you think that way?
Yeah, sure. I worked a lot on the original DirecTV TiVo deployment, and one of the things that just seemed fascinating to me, 10 years ago about DVR was that if you had the ability, the original creative concept for TV was everything was sort of compartmentalized. You can watch a sitcom, it doesn't matter if you've ever seen it before, you get the gist really quickly. And that's a certain sort of creative conceit when you have to actually be able to enter at any point. The Sopranos and other shows that were more serialized, meaning that if you hadn't seen enough of the episodes, you didn't get the backstory. That really changed the game, and so I think 24 is the most obvious example. If you don't see the first 3 episodes of a season of 24, are you going to want to watch the 4th? You're going to want to be able, if you can catch up on those, then you can actually become a binge watcher. You can become a rabid fan because you can consume all of those episodes anytime you want. And I think serial content is actually a lot more sticky as long as you have access to to all the shows, which you didn't before.
But
before DVR.
The yin and the yang with that is if you're a binge watcher, you're fast forwarding through all the commercials.
It's true. That can be true for sure.
Testing 1 2.